Have you ever read Genesis and felt a jarring jump in the storyline? In just a few short chapters, humanity plummets from a single act of disobedience in a garden to a state of such profound corruption that God concludes every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. What happened in between? What was the catalyst for such a rapid, total moral collapse? The Bible itself gives us a single cryptic clue, a verse about sons of God, giants and mighty men of old, and then silence. It's as if a key chapter, the chapter explaining everything, was ripped from the manuscript. Today, we argue that this missing chapter is the Book of Enoch. We will demonstrate how this controversial text is the forbidden key that not only explains the true reason for the Great Flood, but also unlocks the ancient blueprint for the final apocalypse. This isn't just another summary. This is an investigation. We will expose the real crime of the fallen angels, a crime far more sinister than lust, and we will confront the explosive question that the gatekeepers of history never wanted you to ask. Why did they hide the Book of Enoch from you? The evidence has been unsealed. The case is now open. Our investigation begins at the scene of the crime. The location of this conspiracy's inception is well documented in the primary source file, the Book of Enoch, the summit of Mount Hermon. It was here that 200 of the Watchers, the celestial guardians, gathered in secret. This was not a random assembly. It was a premeditated council of war against the laws of heaven. The ringleader, an angel of high rank named Semjaza, understood the gravity of their proposed crime. The record preserves his own words, a chilling piece of evidence that proves premeditation. He addressed his brethren, stating, "I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." He knew the punishment was eternal. He feared facing it alone. His solution was not to abandon the plan, but to turn a potential act of individual rebellion into a binding conspiracy. The record is clear. He compelled all 200 angels to swear a pact, an unholy oath bound by mutual imprecations, mutual curses. If one of them fell, they all would fall. They would share the crime, and they would share the eternal consequences. This was a pact of mutually assured damnation. For the official record, the primary defendants in this conspiracy are listed by name in the text. Names like Arakalba, Ramil, Kokabel, Barakijal, Asael, Armaros, and our primary subject from a previous investigation, Sariel. Each was a commander, a lieutenant in a coordinated cosmic mutiny. This oath is the foundational crime. It demonstrates a conscious, collective decision to defy God's direct order. They were fully aware of the law, and they deliberately chose to break it together. Their motives, at first, seemed to be driven by lust for the daughters of men. But as we will soon see, the true crime, the one with the most devastating and lasting impact on humanity, was not about who they slept with. It was about what secrets they shared. With their oath sealed, they descended. Their mission, to systematically dismantle God's design for humanity, one forbidden secret at a time. The popular narrative simplifies the Watcher's crime to a sin of the flesh. But the evidence file from the Book of Enoch reveals that lust was merely the gateway. It was the cover for a far greater, more insidious transgression. The true crime was not a momentary weakness. It was a calculated act of sabotage. It was the illegal trafficking of celestial contraband. It was the weaponization of knowledge. Let's examine the indictment against the chief defendant on this charge, a fallen angel named Azazel. He is accused of opening the arsenals of heaven. He didn't just hand humanity a sword. He downloaded the entire operating system for organized violence into a primitive culture. He taught men to forge knives, shields, and breastplates. He revealed the secrets of metallurgy and the art of working them. But his corruption wasn't limited to warfare. He introduced vanity and greed, teaching the art of making bracelets, ornaments, and the beautifying of eyelids with antimony. He revealed the allure of costly stones, creating artificial value and sowing the seeds of envy. Azazel's teachings fundamentally rewired human society, shifting it from subsistence to conflict, from innocence to materialism. And Azazel did not act alone. The conspiracy was widespread. The indictment lists further counts against the other leaders. Armaros was charged with teaching the resolving of enchantments, Barakijal with astrology, Kokabel with the constellations. Each commander targeted a different sector of human potential, corrupting it with knowledge humanity was not yet spiritually mature enough to handle. This was the forbidden key they offered, a key that promised power but unlocked Pandora's box. They didn't just break the rules, they gave humanity the tools to break itself. This is the missing catalyst that explains the rapid descent into chaos described in Genesis. Lust may have been the spark, but this forbidden knowledge was the gasoline poured upon the world. The fire was now raging, but the most immediate and monstrous consequence of their rebellion was not yet walking the earth. It was gestating, a physical manifestation of all this spiritual and intellectual corruption. The corruption of humanity's knowledge was a spiritual catastrophe, but the Watcher's conspiracy also produced a physical one. The unholy union of celestial spirit and mortal flesh did not result in enlightened demigods. It resulted in a biological crisis. The Book of Enoch is unflinching in its description of the offspring, the Nephilim, the giants. These were not just men of great stature. They were abominations, living embodiments of the broken covenant. Their very existence an affront to the natural order. The text states their height reached 3,000 ells, a measurement that, while likely symbolic, was meant to convey a scale so immense it defied human comprehension. They were a cancer upon the earth, driven by a singular, insatiable hunger that mirrored the spiritual emptiness of their fathers. Their path of destruction, as we documented in a previous investigation, was absolute. First, they consumed all the resources of man. When that was not enough, they turned on the ecosystem itself, devouring birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish. When the planet's fauna was decimated, they turned on their own human relatives, feasting on mankind. And in the final horrific stage, they turned on each other, their unnatural hunger driving them to cannibalism. But the text adds a chilling detail that connects this physical rampage back to the spiritual crime of their fathers. It says the giants, like their parents, also began to sin against the animal kingdom. This implies more than just consumption. It suggests they continued the work of genetic corruption, creating even more monstrous hybrids. This is the critical context that is completely missing from the Bible. The world before the flood was not just morally corrupt, it was biologically and genetically unstable. It was a world overrun by ravenous, semi-divine hybrids, a failed state on a planetary scale. And as the carnage reached its peak, a new piece of evidence was entered into the cosmic record. The earth itself, personified in the text, began to lay accusation against the lawless ones. The very ground, soaked in blood and groaning under the weight of this defilement, cried out for justice. Its voice ascended to the gates of heaven, a desperate plea from a dying world. The cries were heard, and the high court of heaven was about to convene. The cries of the afflicted earth did not go unheard. Our investigation file, cross-referencing the Book of Enoch, shows that the initial response came from the highest echelons of celestial authority, the Archangels. The text identifies 4 key figures who acted as the first responders to this planetary crisis: Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel. From the ramparts of heaven, they looked down upon a world they no longer recognized. They saw the rampant bloodshed, the lawless chaos, the grotesque perversion of God's creation. The record states their hearts grew heavy with sorrow and anger. They were not detached observers. They were witnesses to a Holocaust, and their testimony would form the basis of the divine prosecution. The text preserves their unified appeal to the throne of God. It's a powerful, formal indictment, a legal plea on behalf of a dying world. They spoke as one. The earth, once a place of peace, now cries out with the voices of the afflicted, their cries reaching the gates of heaven. They were not just reporting a problem, they were acting as legal advocates for the souls of men, bringing their case before the Most High. Their address to the Lord of Lords, God of Gods, King of Kings is a masterclass in celestial jurisprudence. They begin by acknowledging his absolute sovereignty and omniscience. You have created all things and hold power over all. Nothing is hidden from your sight. You see all things. This is not mere flattery. It is a strategic legal move, establishing the court's absolute jurisdiction and foreknowledge of the crimes. Then they present the charges, naming the chief conspirators. You see what Azazel has done, they declare, teaching unrighteousness on earth and revealing the eternal secrets that were meant for heaven. They specifically name Semjaza for leading his associates astray and for the unholy union with human women that produced the giants. They lay out the consequences. The women have borne giants, and the earth is now filled with blood and unrighteousness. They conclude their appeal with a powerful, haunting question that hangs in the air of the celestial court. You, who know all things before they come to pass, have seen these events and allowed them. Yet, you have not told us what we are to do to them. It is a plea for clarity, a plea for instruction, a plea for judgment. The case has been presented. The evidence of widespread corruption is undeniable. The celestial prosecutors have rested their case. The entire universe now holds its breath, awaiting the verdict from the ultimate judge. The appeal of the Archangels was answered. The text states that the Most High, the Holy and Great One spoke. The divine silence was broken, and what followed was not a deliberation, but a series of swift, decisive, and terrifyingly specific executive orders. The judgment was handed down, and each archangel was given a precise mission, a targeted operation to begin the systematic cleansing of the planet. Operation Directive 1 was assigned to Uriel. His mission was one of preservation. He was sent to the son of Lamech, Noah, with a direct warning. Tell him in
Let
my
the
name,
pact be
hide
sealed.
thyself. Uriel was to reveal the coming apocalypse, the global deluge that would destroy the earth, and to provide Noah with the instructions for escape. The primary objective was to preserve a pure genetic seed for the future of humanity. This was the first move in the divine strategy: secure the future before dismantling the corrupted present. Operation Directive 2 was assigned to Raphael. His mission was to neutralize the primary source of the intellectual corruption, Azazel. The orders were brutal and specific. Bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him there. Place rough and jagged rocks over him. Let him abide there forever. Azazel, the teacher of war and vanity, was to be buried alive in a tomb of rock and shadow, a fitting end for one who had brought so much darkness into the world. The charge sheet explicitly states, "To him ascribe all sin." Operation Directive 3 was assigned to Gabriel. His mission was direct extermination of the hybrid offspring. Proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication. Destroy the children of the watchers from among men. But God's method was chillingly ironic. Gabriel was not to simply slaughter them. He was commanded to send them to fight each other in battle so that they may destroy one another. The very violence their fathers had taught humanity was now to be turned upon them as the instrument of their own annihilation. The sentence also included a statute of limitations on their lifespan, confirming that their hope for eternal life was void. Finally, Operation Directive 4 was assigned to the commander of the heavenly host, Michael. His mission was to apprehend the ringleader, Semjaza, and all his associates. After they were forced to witness the slaughter of their own children, they were to be bound for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth until the day of their judgment. Their final destination, the abyss of fire, the eternal prison. The orders were given. The missions were assigned. The celestial war machine had been activated. The judgment of the Watchers was now in motion. A multi-pronged assault designed to decapitate the leadership, eliminate the offspring, and quarantine the planet for a complete and total reset. While the Archangels prepared for a war of extermination, our central witness, Enoch, was given a different and in many ways more psychologically harrowing mission. He was not to be a warrior, but a herald of the damned. He was tasked with being the one to formally serve the indictment to his former celestial brethren. The Book of Enoch describes a surreal scene. The fallen Watchers, now aware that their crimes had been exposed, were seized with fear and trembling. Their arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the dawning horror of their eternal fate. They gathered together in a place of weeping, their faces covered in shame. They could no longer lift their eyes to heaven, their connection to God permanently severed by their own actions. In their desperation, they turned to the one being who could still traverse the realms, Enoch. They begged him to act as their intermediary, their defense attorney. They asked him to write a petition for their forgiveness and to present it on their behalf to the Lord of Heaven. It was a moment of profound irony. The celestial beings, once guardians of humanity, were now entirely dependent on a mortal man to plead their case. Enoch, the scribe of righteousness, agreed. He wrote down their prayers, their pleas for mercy, and a lengthening of their days. He then went to the waters of Dan to read their petition and pray, eventually falling into a visionary sleep. But the vision he received was not one of hope. It was a direct confirmation of the verdict. A voice from the heavens commanded him to return to the Watchers, not as their advocate, but as their judge. He was to reprimand them, to read them their sentence in person. Imagine the weight of this task. Enoch had to stand before 200 powerful, desperate, and potentially violent fallen angels and deliver a message of absolute, eternal condemnation. He found them huddled together, weeping, and he began to speak the words given to him in the vision. He confirmed their worst fears. "Your plea will not be granted unto you throughout all the days of eternity," he declared. "Judgment has been passed upon you." He told them they would never again ascend to heaven, but would be bound in the earth for all the days of the world. He delivered the most painful blow of all. "You shall witness the destruction of your beloved sons, and you shall find no pleasure in them. They shall fall before you by the sword." He made it clear that their petitions, both for their children and for themselves, would not be granted, even though you weep and pray and speak all the words contained in the writing I have written. This was Enoch's terrible and sacred duty. He was not just a prophet who saw the future. He was the bailiff of the divine court, serving the final, unappealable writ of judgment upon the very beings who had once been his celestial companions. The door to mercy was officially and finally closed. We have now presented the core testimony from the Book of Enoch. We've seen the crime, the judgment, and the devastating finality of the verdict. This is where most summaries of the book stop. But our investigation, our mission, is to go one step further. We must now address the central question, the one that echoes through the comments of every video on this topic, the question that is the very reason for this channel's existence. Why was this key hidden? Why was this entire detailed account of a cosmic war, a story so foundational to understanding the rest of the Bible, deliberately excluded from the final canon? This was not an oversight. It was a conscious decision made by the gatekeepers of Scripture. And our investigation has uncovered two primary motives. Let's open the first file. Motive number 1. It shifts the blame. The foundational narrative of Judeo-Christian theology is the story of the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. It's a simple, powerful story that places the primary responsibility for the introduction of sin and corruption squarely on the shoulders of humanity. Adam and Eve made a choice, and the world has been paying the price ever since. This doctrine of original sin is a cornerstone of the entire framework of salvation. Now, introduce the Book of Enoch. Suddenly, the story is no longer so simple. The narrative is complicated by a second parallel fall, the fall of the angels. Enoch's testimony presents a world where humanity's descent into total depravity was not solely an internal failure. It was accelerated, weaponized, and amplified by a direct, malicious intervention from powerful celestial beings. This creates a profound theological problem for a simple system of justice. It suggests that humanity was not just a sinner, it was also a victim of a celestial conspiracy, of a campaign of disinformation and corruption waged by beings far older, wiser, and more powerful than themselves. This narrative doesn't absolve humanity of its guilt, but it does distribute it. It implies that the blame for the pre-flood world's wickedness is shared. This is a dangerous and inconvenient truth for a theology that relies on the simple premise of human guilt and the need for a singular solution. By removing the Book of Enoch, the gatekeepers could maintain the simpler, cleaner narrative. They could keep the focus entirely on the sin of Adam, without the messy complication of a full-scale demonic invasion. The key was hidden because it pointed to other suspects in the crime of humanity's fall. Shifting the blame for humanity's fall was a powerful motive for censoring the Book of Enoch. But our investigation reveals a second, more fundamental reason for its exclusion. This wasn't just about protecting a doctrine, it was about controlling a worldview. Let's open motive number 2. It exposes the invisible war. The canonical Bible, particularly the Old Testament, presents a world where God's interactions with humanity are often direct and personal. He speaks to patriarchs, gives laws to prophets, and guides the destiny of his chosen people. The spiritual realm is present, but often operates in the background. The Book of Enoch, however, rips the veil away completely. It presents a universe teeming with spiritual activity, a cosmos filled with countless angels, hierarchies, and warring factions. It doesn't just suggest a spiritual battle, it provides a detailed organizational chart of the enemy's command structure. It gives names, roles, and specific crimes to the celestial beings waging war against humanity. This creates a radically different reality for the believer. It transforms the journey of faith from a simple path of moral obedience into an active participation in a cosmic, invisible war. It suggests that the struggles we face on Earth, from personal temptation to global conflict, are often reflections or even direct results of this unseen battle. For the gatekeepers trying to establish a unified, accessible religion, this was a terrifyingly complex and potentially frightening worldview to present to the masses. A religion focused on personal morality, community laws, and a covenant with God is manageable. But a religion that reveals a constant, ongoing war with named demonic princes and their hybrid offspring, that is a far more intense and demanding reality. It requires a level of spiritual awareness and discernment that could be seen as destabilizing. By excluding the Book of Enoch, they could effectively demilitarize the spiritual landscape. They could downplay the overt, organized nature of the demonic opposition and keep the focus on human sin and repentance. They hid this key because it unlocked a door to a reality that was deemed too intense, too Gnostic, and too complex for the average believer. The irony is that the New Testament itself is filled with references to this very war. The Apostle Paul speaks of wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. The Book of Revelation is, in essence, the final climactic battle report of this very war. The Book of Enoch provides the backstory, the intelligence briefing on the enemy we are told to fight. By removing it, the gatekeepers gave us our marching orders, but they hid the enemy's battle plans. Our investigation has now exposed why this forbidden key was hidden. But that leads us to the most practical part of our mission today. Now that the book has been brought back into the light, how do we actually use it? Many of you have shared your own experiences, stating that you've tried to read the Book of Enoch yourself, but found it challenging, complicated, and hard to follow. You are not alone, and you are right. So, let's take a moment to decode the decoder. Why is this book so difficult for a modern reader, and what is the key to understanding it correctly? The first and most important thing to realize is that the Book of Enoch is not a history book or a theological textbook in the way we think of them today. It belongs to a very specific genre of ancient literature known as apocalyptic literature. The word apocalypse doesn't just mean the end of the world. Its original Greek meaning is an unveiling or a revelation. These texts were designed to unveil the hidden spiritual realities that operate behind the curtain of our physical world. To do this, they use a language that is intentionally symbolic, metaphorical, and visionary. When Enoch describes a wall built of crystals surrounded by tongues of fire, he is not describing a literal building. He is attempting to put the ineffable, overwhelming reality of the spiritual realm into the limited vocabulary of human language. He's translating a divine vision into mortal words. This is the key to reading not just Enoch, but also other apocalyptic books in the Bible, like Daniel and Revelation. We must not get bogged down in trying to interpret every detail literally. Instead, we should ask, what is the larger truth this symbol is trying to convey? The fiery rivers, the magnificent mountains of precious stones, the celestial treasuries of wind and thunder. These are all metaphors for the awesome, terrifying, and perfectly ordered power of God's creation. So, if you have ever felt lost or overwhelmed while reading Enoch, that is a perfectly normal reaction. You are reading someone's direct, unfiltered, visionary experience. It is not meant to be a simple narrative. It is a journey into the deep, symbolic heart of the cosmos. The purpose of this channel and this video is to act as your guide on that journey, to help you navigate the symbols and extract the powerful, life-changing truths hidden within. As we guide you through this complex text, it is crucial to address another major point of confusion, a modern layer of interpretation that many of you have found distracting and problematic: the ancient aliens controversy. The video you just watched, like many modern retellings, chose to illustrate Enoch's celestial journey using images of UFOs, astronauts, and advanced spacecraft. This is a common trope, fueled by popular theories that the angels of the Bible were in fact extraterrestrial visitors, and that the heavens they took Enoch to was a mothership in orbit. Let us be perfectly clear about where this channel stands. While we respect the right of others to explore those theories, that is not our investigation. Our mission is one of Kyo than Hoc, theological archaeology, not science fiction speculation. The inclusion of UFOs in the Enoch narrative, in our view, is a fundamental misreading of the text and a disservice to its profound spiritual message. When Enoch describes being lifted up on the clouds or traveling on the wings of angels, he is using the symbolic language of his time to describe a spiritual, interdimensional journey. To reduce this divine revelation to a simple ride in a flying saucer is to strip it of its sacred power. The beings he encountered were not biological aliens from another planet. They were metaphysical entities from a different plane of existence. The heavens he saw were not outer space. They were higher dimensions of spiritual reality. The conflict he witnessed was not a galactic war between alien races. It was a cosmic battle between holiness and rebellion, a theme central to the Book of Enoch and the entire biblical narrative. The ancient astronaut theory, while entertaining, ultimately distracts from the core message. It pulls the focus away from the spiritual truths, the nature of sin, the need for judgment, the coming apocalypse, and shifts it to idle speculation about technology. Therefore, in our analysis and visual representations, we will always strive to remain faithful to the original context. We will portray these events through the lens of ancient art, religious symbolism, and mythic imagery. Our goal is not to prove that angels were aliens. Our goal is to understand the terrifying and magnificent spiritual reality that Enoch was trying to describe. The truth, we believe, is far more profound and mysterious than any simple story of visitors from the stars. Having clarified our investigative approach, we must now address a crucial question of credibility that many of you have asked. What is the actual, tangible connection between the Book of Enoch and the Bible? Is it just some random, unrelated text, or does it have a legitimate place in the history of biblical thought? The evidence for its importance is undeniable, and it is found directly within the pages of the New Testament itself. Let's examine the primary exhibit, the Book of Jude. In his short but powerful epistle, Jude, the brother of James, makes a direct and unambiguous reference to the Book of Enoch. In verses 14 and 15 he writes, "It was also about these that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all and to convict all the ungodly of all their deeds of ungodliness that they have ungodly committed." This is not a paraphrase. This is a direct quote from the Book of Enoch, chapter 1, verse 9. This is a bombshell piece of evidence. It proves without a shadow of a doubt that the earliest followers of Christ were not only familiar with the Book of Enoch, but they considered it authoritative enough to be quoted alongside canonical scripture as a true prophecy. Jude treated Enoch's words as divinely inspired, and he was not alone. The influence of Enoch is woven throughout the fabric of New Testament thought. The Apostle Peter's descriptions of the imprisoned angels in 2 Peter are clearly informed by the Enochian narrative. The concepts of the abyss, the final judgment of the watchers, and the nature of the spiritual war all find their most detailed expression in Enoch. Even some of the language Jesus uses to describe the coming of the Son of Man and the final judgment in the Gospels has strong parallels with the prophecies found in Enoch's visions. Furthermore, many of the most influential early church fathers, figures like Tertullian, Justin Martyr, and Origen, held the Book of Enoch in high regard, frequently referencing it in their own theological writings. So, while the book was ultimately excluded from the final canon by most denominations in later centuries, a historical decision we have already investigated, its importance to the writers and thinkers of the New Testament era is undeniable. It was not a fringe text. It was a foundational piece of literature that provided the theological and cosmological background for many of the key ideas in early Christianity, especially concerning angelology, demonology, and the coming apocalypse. To ignore the Book of Enoch is to ignore a vital source that profoundly shaped the world in which the Bible was written. We have now established the authenticity and influence of the Book of Enoch on the early church. But this leads us to the ultimate payoff, the reason we call this text the Forbidden Key. Its true explosive significance is not just in how it explains the past, but in how it provides the foundational blueprint for the future. Specifically, the future as described in the final, most terrifying book of the Bible, the Book of Revelation. Think of it this way. If the Book of Revelation is the blockbuster movie of the apocalypse, then the Book of Enoch is the original banned script it was based on. The core themes, the sequence of events, and the key players in John's vision on Patmos are all foreshadowed and in many cases first detailed in Enoch's journey centuries earlier. Let's examine the evidence. Exhibit A, the Great Tribulation. Enoch describes a future time of immense suffering and tribulation that will come upon the wicked before the final judgment. This concept of a specific final period of global distress is the very foundation upon which the tribulation narrative in Revelation is built. Exhibit B, the Messianic figure. Enoch's visions are filled with a mysterious pre-existent divine figure he calls the Son of Man, the Elect One, and the Righteous One. This being is given authority by God to preside over the final judgment, to sit on a throne of glory, and to be a light to the nations. This is one of the clearest and most detailed pre-Christian prophecies of the Messiah in his role as the ultimate judge, a role Jesus claims for himself in the Gospels and fully executes in the Book of Revelation. Exhibit C, the judgment of fallen angels. While other parts of the Old Testament hint at it, the Book of Enoch is the first text to explicitly and graphically describe a final cataclysmic judgment reserved for the fallen angels and their demonic host. This theme becomes a climactic event in Revelation, where Michael wages war against the dragon and his angels are cast out of heaven for good. Exhibit D, the new heaven and new earth. After the final judgment, Enoch describes a transformed, renewed earth, a place of eternal righteousness and peace, where the elect will live in joy and light. This is the primordial promise, the original blueprint for the New Jerusalem and the new heaven and new earth, described in the final chapters of Revelation. The connection is undeniable. The Book of Enoch provides the thematic and narrative skeleton that the Book of Revelation later fleshes out with its own unique, powerful imagery. It is the prequel that sets the stage, introduces the main conflict, and defines the terms of the final battle. To try and understand the apocalypse without understanding Enoch is like watching the final movie in a trilogy without ever having seen the first one. You might understand the action, but you will miss the entire meaning behind it. This is the key they hid from you. Our investigation has demonstrated that the Book of Enoch is the foundational key to understanding the biblical narrative, from the first rebellion to the final apocalypse. But the most unsettling part of this entire case file is not what it says about the past, it's what it reflects about our present. The legacy of the Watchers is not a closed chapter of ancient history. Their primary crime, the trafficking of forbidden knowledge, has left an echo that is now roaring in our modern world. Consider the core of their transgression. They gave humanity powerful tools without the corresponding spiritual wisdom to wield them responsibly. They accelerated our technological and intellectual capacity far beyond our moral maturity, and the consequences were catastrophic. Now, look around you. We live in an age where human beings are on the cusp of wielding powers that were once the domain of gods. With technologies like CRISPR, we are rewriting the very source code of life, genetic engineering that mirrors the ancient corruption of the animal kingdom. We are building artificial intelligences with the potential for superhuman consciousness, yet we have no unified moral framework to guide their development. We have created weapons capable of incinerating the entire planet at the push of a button, a modern-day equivalent of the warfare taught by Azazel. The parallels are chilling and exact. We are once again a species grappling with forbidden knowledge, with powers that are outpacing our wisdom. The very sins that led to the judgment of the flood are being repeated on a global, technological scale. The Book of Enoch, then, is not just a historical record. It is a warning. It is a recurring pattern, a cautionary tale about the inherent danger of seeking power without righteousness, of pursuing knowledge without humility. It suggests that the path to destruction is paved with good intentions and brilliant innovations that lack a divine moral compass. The question it forces us to ask is a deeply uncomfortable one. Are we living through a modern-day echo of the days of Noah? Are we, right now, being seduced by our own technological watchers, accepting forbidden keys that promise progress but may unlock our own destruction? The legacy of the fallen angels is not just a story in a banned book. It is a mirror reflecting our own precarious moment in history, and it warns that the same judgment that fell upon the ancient world is never far from our own. We have reached the conclusion of our investigation. We began with a single, unsettling silence in the pages of Genesis and followed the trail of evidence to a forbidden book that changes everything. We have seen how the Book of Enoch is not just a strange piece of apocrypha, but the foundational key that unlocks the deepest mysteries of the Bible, from the true nature of the fallen angels' crime to the ancient blueprint for the final apocalypse. We have presented the evidence for why this key was hidden. It complicates the narrative of sin, and it exposes a cosmic invisible war that the gatekeepers of history found too complex and too terrifying to reveal. We have listened to your questions, decoding the complexities of the text and separating theological truth from modern fiction. And we have seen how its ancient warnings echo with chilling relevance in our own technologically saturated world. The gatekeepers of the past made a decision. They chose to hide this key from you, believing you were not ready or perhaps not worthy of the full, uncensored truth. They presented you with a simpler story, a safer story. But today, through the rediscovery of texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls, that choice is no longer theirs to make. It is yours. The forbidden knowledge is now in your hands. You now know about the celestial conspiracy, the true crime of the Watchers, and the profound impact this banned chapter has on the entire biblical narrative. The choice that lies before you is simple, yet profound. Will you continue to accept the abridged, edited version of the story you were given? Or will you have the courage to pick up this forbidden key, to unlock the door for yourself, and to confront the full, awesome, and terrifying reality of the cosmic war you were born into? The investigation is closed, but your journey of understanding has only just begun. The Book of Enoch is no longer hidden. The only question that remains is whether you will choose to read it.